Wow, this is very interesting. If the Conservatives were not so obsessed by pursuing their own convoluted conspiracy theories, narratives, attacking members of Parliament.
Oh yes, today's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. Now, as mentioned in yesterday's video, today's video is going to be the continuation of the Public Accounts Committee hearing. Fair warning, some of these clips can be a little bit long. Some are 6 to 10 minutes because it's both parties having their 5 or 6 minute intervals to question each. I will cut out what is necessary. But as you heard from the opening statement there, or the opening clip, MP Shanahan tried to make it sound like it was the Conservatives that were doing all these things. However, in these clips, you're going to see it's MP Shanahan and Khalid versus MP Barrett and Brock. And Khalid actually is the one that starts off the attacks, as you're going to see in this clip.
Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here today. Commissioner, I'll start by asking, have you heard of the Conservative opposition motion that was passed on June 10th, was presented on June 6th of 2024 in the House?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware what the motion you're referring to.
So this motion required a production of documents from the government, the Auditor General, SDTC, to be presented to the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Council with the intention of providing these documents to the RCMP. Now, in a recent letter that was to this committee, the RCMP commissioner sounded the alarm, saying that this House order, which is this motion I'm referring to, is interfering in operational and police independence. This is happening in a free and fair society like Canada. Commissioner, have you ever seen instances where the legislative branch tried to interfere or direct police as to how to do their jobs?
No, I am not aware of any such instance.
And how do you feel about that interference?
You know, are you asking me to comment on the behavior of Parliament? I'm a servant of Parliament. I do what you direct me to do. It's a bit hard to suggest that asking me to say whether the motion passed by Parliament was appropriate or not. Obviously, the Commissioner of the RCMP feels it's not proper under the circumstances. And, you know, if he will have good reasons for explaining, I presume you should ask him rather than me about this.
Commissioner, respectfully, I do believe that even though you're an employee of Parliament, you have a very, very important responsibility to be hands-off, to be independent of the actions of Parliament. In fact, you oversee a very important aspect of what parliamentarians do. Now, the Auditor General was recently in the news saying that this specific Conservative House motion would compromise her independence. Commissioner, what's your reaction to hearing a fellow officer of Parliament sound the alarm that parliamentarians are putting her work and her office in jeopardy?
Well, obviously, it's of concern. I mean, the whole way why we set up these various offices are to be independent of any politics and to come up with a fact and present them to the public and inform the public of what's going on, and if there's any misdeeds or anything that is shouldn't have done, to expose it. And anything that's done to interfere with the independence of this and put in question any report that's issued by one of these offices defeats the whole purpose. I mean, you are independent. That's why you are trustworthy. You're not influenced by outside influences. You're not. You have to be. What you have to do is find the facts and expose them, and that should be done as without any interference from Parliament.
Now, is it usual practice for an officer of Parliament to raise alarm bells like this in your experience?
I'm not aware that, from personally, I'm not aware of that it has been done before. It may have been. I haven't researched the issue.
I mean, it is, as you said, Commissioner, quite alarming that that parliamentarians would interfere with the work of independent office holders that are there to provide scrutiny. So, it is quite troubling in my point of view. Now, the government has addressed the situation that we're talking about today, which is what I think Canadians expect of our government, but that doesn't quite suffice for the cons, because what matters most for them is to create chaos. And Mr. Polyev and his cons, they thrive in chaos. They need to create it everywhere that they go, and in turn, they look to hurt trust in our institutions, including your office, Commissioner. So when they use the House to direct or to seek influence police in this country and compromise officers of Parliament, they're looking to hurt the trust in the institutions that they one day will seek to govern. Commissioner, in your view, what is the long-term damage that is being done to Parliament and to institutions based on this conduct?
Asking me to make a political judgment. I'm sorry, I cannot do that. You're basically suggesting that the action of your opponents are undermining the system and will cause damage in the long term, and I want me to agree. That's for people. That's for you to judge.
I'm
the electorate, not for me.
I'm afraid that is the time all around.
Oh, I wish I was surprised that the Liberals continuously try this fear-mongering tactic about democracy and the Conservatives, but I'm not. They always say that we should be worried about it, that Parliament is just going to go into pure chaos, that democracy no longer will be followed. These independent parties aren't going to be able to do their jobs because the Conservatives will basically tell them how to do it. When it's actually the complete opposite. The Liberals have been the ones that haven't been following process. The Conservatives are the ones that are trying to uncover all these things through the parliamentary process. And it's also so surprising that she's trying this weaselly tactic with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Does she not think that this guy's gonna see what kind of path she's leading him down with these questions? Like, he flat out shut her down. And now you're going to hear Brock come back at her in this clip.
Beginning our third round, Mr. Brock, I believe you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Commissioner, and welcome, Council. It's always good to see you back. I guess the first concern that I have is I'm quite astonished of the commentary from my colleague, Ms. Khalid, in terms of her interpretation of a demand for documents as saw fit by a majority of members of Parliament. And as you will agree with me, I'm sure, Mr. Commissioner, that Parliament is supreme. Committees are supreme. And we can just about order anything we want unfettered. In fact, the House of Commons top lawyer basically affirmed that position, that documentation needed to be produced to get to the bottom of yet another scandal by this corrupted Liberal government under Justin Trudeau. So perhaps Ms. Khalid needs to be informed that simply obtaining documents and forwarding those documents to the RCMP is not and never would be seen to be interference. It aids in their investigation. She is somehow suggesting, wrongly and deliberately wrongly, that by asking and furnishing documents to the RCMP, we are directing an outcome, which you know, Commissioner, is completely ridiculous. The RCMP are completely independent and are unfettered in their decision to lay charges or not. You'd agree with that?
Yeah.
Regardless of what Parliament said, regardless of what Justin Trudeau may have said, they have that final discretion. So Ms. Khalid needs to be educated on the powers that the RCMP actually have. But a broader concern I have is this. Really, why are you here, Commissioner? As much as I enjoy listening to you and listening to your counsel, You were selected and you were chosen to come here by the Liberal Party. And right out of the gate, they asked you questions about your mandate as if they didn't even know why you were here. As we well know, and you can confirm, Commissioner, there's at least a dozen other investigations into this ArriveCan scandal, including the Auditor General and the RCMP and numerous colleagues of your level, various commissioners, actually examining this scandal. Why weren't they here today? But they chose you. You made it clear to this committee earlier this year that you have no mandate with respect to the ArriveCan, do you?
I don't. And
You don't.
my opening statement today made that absolutely
Made it
clear.
abundantly clear. So this is now twice you've made it clear you have no mandate, yet the Liberals wasted this committee time and wasted your time, sir, from doing the good work that you are obviously doing throughout the year. How much time do I have?
Mr. Brock, just to hold, I want to just push you back in your lane. The witness is here, the invitation of the full committee. So I appreciate you're welcome to raise his relevance, but he is a committee witness. So just to nudge back in, if you could, on that. There are no.
Certainly.
Yeah, I appreciate you've
Certainly.
got a minute 45 left.
Okay, so let's get to your report, the Verschuren report. We've heard from my colleague, Mr. Perkins, that she somehow benefited from the decision-making that she either made or abstained on voting but not recusing herself, upwards to $10 million. You found her guilty of breaching two aspects of the Act. I want to know, and I'm sure Canadians watching this want to know, what is the penalty for her?
Penalty for her is, as the Act provides right now, basically exposure. She is
Sorry?
exposure.
Exposure.
Yeah, or if you
Name
want,
and
if you
shame.
want, you had a conflict of interest. If we expose it, you get it certified. It does damage to your reputation. That's how the Act works. The Act does not have any penalties, except for minor penalties on reporting things, and the consequences are. To obviously, if the person who appointed her, she has resigned. But if not, for instance, one option it would have been for the government to ask her to resign, etc. If they felt the breach that we pointed out was severe enough, etc. We find it is the whole process is essentially, if you want to put it bluntly, is we investigate, we expose. And to some extent, we do damage to your reputation. That's all we can do. The person who appointed, we're talking about a reporting public office holder, whoever appointed them can decide if they want to do other actions.
Meanwhile, the
Thank you.
taxpayer is owed $10 million.
Mr. Brock.
Now, before we move on, there's two things that I want to touch upon. Number one is the question that Brock posed in regards to the punishment for somebody who is found guilty of benefiting from a conflict of interest or, mismanaging funds. The person they're talking about in particular is Anita Verschuren, who I'm sure you've seen her picture, at least in the media. She has resigned, as Commissioner Conrad had stated. The best they could do is tarnish their reputation, and I guess this was her punishment. However, I feel like jail time should be required for this. And number two, you can actually see from the Conservative chair himself, his actions repute what the Liberals are trying to put forward. John Williamson corrected Brock and said, listen, you can't. It's not just the Liberals who invited Commissioner Conrad. This was a committee type thing. So, kind of reel it back. You continue your questioning, but reel it back on blaming it on them. Brock acknowledged that. But again, this is a Conservative chair who's playing fair. He's being very neutral across the board. Him and John Brizard are kind of the two Conservative chairs that I love to watch because they are very, very fair. However, this does seem to kind of bite them a little bit in the ass because Shanahan decides to take advantage of this, as you're going to see in the next clip.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank you for correcting the record earlier when Mr. Brock was claiming that we had called the witness and we were wasting time and we were having these meetings that is wasting members' time. Thank you for correcting that record because as a member of Parliament, as someone who takes this committee very seriously, to see it being used time and time again to push the conservative narrative, a false narrative, a narrative which is going down rabbit holes and witch hunts and God knows what else is going on, not allowing the duly appointed independent officers of Parliament to do the jobs that they have to do. Because if it was the case that those officers of Parliament, of which I'm very glad to see the Commissioner here for Conflict of Interest and Ethics, if they were not doing their job, then indeed parliamentarians would be called into action. But when they are doing their jobs, the RCMP, the Auditor General, anyone else that is doing their investigation, we must let them do their work. And I want to read out now for the record from the letter from the Commissioner of the RCMP. And this is the letter, Chair, that we were sent July 25th. It's a letter that is directed to the law clerk, Michelle Bedard. The RCMP has reviewed the implications of the motion. This is the motion of June 6, in a potential criminal investigation. Before taking any investigative steps to access documents that may give rise to a reasonable expectation of privacy, the RCMP must comply with the applicable legal standards to preserve the viability of any potential criminal investigation or prosecution. The Parliamentary Production Order does not set aside these legal requirements. The Parliamentary Production Order does not set aside these legal requirements, I repeat. For the reasons set out above, the RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is therefore highly unlikely that any information obtained by the RCMP under the motion where privacy interests exist could be used to support a criminal prosecution or further a criminal investigation. How much time do I have, Chair?
2 minutes, 20 seconds.
Excellent. I continue. Given the risks associated with receiving information under the motion or other compulsory authorities, practices need to be put in place to identify the nature and the source of the information, with a view to determining whether it contains charter-protected information. Charter-protected information. Any information obtained through the motion or other compulsory authorities would need to be segregated from an RCMP investigation. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. I'm going to repeat that again, Chair. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. The government has taken corrective steps in order to ensure better oversight and accountability to the personnel and finances of STCDC, because, yeah, stuff happens. Stuff happens, and we need to have the processes. We need to have the processes in place in order to investigate and to make corrective action, which has been done in this case by transitioning this program to the National Research Council.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan.
But we're not looking for solutions here, are we? We're just looking to muckrack.
We will.
Did you hear that, guys? Stuff happens. That simple as that. Stuff happens. That's her defense. Is stuff happens, so we should just sit back and let the other people do their job and investigate. But instead of finding solutions, we're going to muckrack, is what she said. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what muckracking is, it's to search out and publicly expose real or apparent misconduct of a prominent individual or a business. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't we want to find out, like, GC Strategies using all of those funds for a 2-person consulting firm? Why wouldn't we want to know that? Or the indigenous processes? Why wouldn't we want to investigate and look into that? Like, she contradicts herself so much. And Michael Barrett actually goes in on her in this next clip, as you're going to see, where he says, it's not a conservative thing. Majority of Parliament voted on this process, and we have all the power to do that.
Have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Chair, I just want to take a minute to just quickly respond to Ms. Shanahan's very animated opinions on what Parliament can and can't do. So a majority of members of the House of Commons passed a motion. And so that's important. A majority members of the House. So the Liberals want to act like they have a majority, but certainly they don't. And a majority of members saw the corruption of this Liberal government and passed this motion. And the motion calls for documents to be sent to the RCMP. And Ms. Shanahan read a letter, and I just want to share from the Parliamentary Legal Counsel a quote from his letter to the Speaker of the House of Commons. The power to send for documents is absolute and unfettered, period. It is a constitutional parliamentary privilege not limited by statute. As such, the House is not constrained by statutory obligations contained in legislation such as the Access to Information Act, the Privacy Act. I also note that the order did not contemplate that redactions be made to the document or that information be withheld. It's without limit. It's absolute. So they may not like it, and they certainly don't seem to understand it, but it's the law. And a majority of members of the House who were democratically elected made that decision. Now, we know that their Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, favors a dictatorship, but that's not how our system works. Now, the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police does report to a minister in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, as per Section 5 of the RCMP Act. But the RCMP, of course, has full and final discretion on the investigations that they launch. But that's not going to stop Parliament from doing its job. We'll make the information available. The RCMP can choose to investigate or not. But much to Mr. Trudeau and his Liberal members here's chagrin, this is democracy, not a dictatorship. A majority of members of the House made a decision, and they can call independent officers of Parliament here to get them to opine on it. But it doesn't change the fact that it's legal. It's the right thing to do, especially after 9 years of the most corrupt government in history. And that's what we have with these members in that Liberal government.
Ooh-wee. Michael Barrett went scorched earth on Mrs. Shanahan and the Liberal Party. He gave no F's right there. He just laid it out, and that was beautiful to see. But as we get back to the clip, he now poses a question in regards to Randy Boissonnault and Stephen Anderson, another Liberal scandal, because Commissioner Conrad here has been the one who gave Randy Boissonnault the clearance. This is the clearance that Randy keeps saying, I've been investigated. They say there was no conflict of interest, so we're all good. And he questions him on the new evidence that's come up.
Commissioner, I want to move on to yet another Liberal scandal. Did you have an opportunity to review the testimony of Mr. Stephen Anderson, who's the business partner of Justin Trudeau's minister from Edmonton, Randy Boissonnault? He recently appeared at the Ethics Committee. Did you have an opportunity to review that testimony, sir?
Opportunity. I read about it in the paper. I did not watch it personally.
So there's new evidence that was presented of a business-related text messages between Mr. Anderson and a client of Mr. Boissonnault's company. Now, in these messages, Mr. Anderson refers to Mr. Boissonnault 9 times, saying there's going to be a partner call. He went on to admit that there was only one Randy at the company. And we even saw in these text messages that Randy was in Vancouver, Randy in the text messages, the same time that Justin Trudeau's minister, Randy Boissonnault, was in Vancouver at the cabinet retreat. So the evidence of Randy Boissonnault being involved is quite heavy. It's contained in the text messages that were presented at the Ethics Committee. Does this new information require a further look into the matter by you? A brief answer, if you could, sir.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't give you a brief answer, but I'll give you an answer. Okay. As you raised this issue, you raised this issue with me before. I looked into it and saw there was a reasonable grounds to start. I became convinced that on September 8th, which was the issue day in question, I'm waiting for you because I'm talking to you. I want to see, we have to make sure we both understand each other. It concerns September 8. September 8, there was no way Mr. Boissonnault offered to give me all the information on September 8. His conversation, telephone conversations, emails, whatever. And we looked at all of that, and there was absolutely no way that there was contact between him and Mr. Anderson. Now this new stuff has come up, which I wasn't unaware of, and I wrote to Mr. Boissonnault again yesterday, and I said, I am concerned about these things. Now, please, and these are September 6 and 7. So far, I know there was no communication on September 8 because you were in cabinet locker, and I have all the documents. Mr. Anderson's email suggests that he was in contact with you. Would you please provide me the same information for September 6th and 7th as you've done for 8th? When I get that, I will determine whether Mr. Anderson is using the name in vain or whether there was actually conversations.
Brief time left. I appreciate the answer that you're looking for more information from Mr. Boissonnault. Yeah. How can you be assured that you're receiving information from all of his text messages? We know that he used the app called Signal. We know he used other text messaging apps. Are you certain that you have the messages from all of the messaging applications that he used, including Signal and any other instant messaging application?
We specified in the letter that we want any means of communication electronically, it is between the two of them, whether it's, as you say, Signal or Skype or whatever you use, etc., or telephone contact. Once I get that information, I will be able to exercise my judgment, say, as a reasonable grounds to suspect that there was an involvement of Mr. Boissonnault in this, and therefore an investigation is launched, or really his name is being used in vain by Mr. Anderson in order to give extra credibility to his emails.
Okay, I appreciate your answer.
That is the time.
Now, this line of question by the Conservatives comes up quite a bit in regards to Randy Boissonnault, because even in my opinion, Commissioner Conrad's answer didn't really seem suitable enough. He basically said that he never found him in a conflict of interest because the documents that he provided to him on the 8th didn't implicate him of anything. However, with the new evidence from Stephen Anderson and them being on different dates, he now has to get that information from Randy, and then he'll decide whether he needs to do an investigation or not. However, just like Michael Barrett and even Larry Brock, as we're going to see in a bit, say, there's other ways of hiding these things. There's multiple communications apps. You can use different types of devices like phones and laptops and this and that. So how can you trust that you're getting all the information that you need? And even Garnet Genuis and MP Perkins asked him, are you using the honor system? He never confirms or denies it, but the way he answers it kind of sounds like, oh, well, I'm not really using an honor system, even though that's exactly how it sounds like what he's doing. But before we get into Brock asking some more details on this, we're going to hear again from MP Shanahan. And I cut a portion of her rereading her letter or continuing reading her letter, and then it will jump into Brock, as you're going to see here.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor again for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. And wow, this is very interesting. If the Conservatives were not so obsessed by pursuing their own convoluted conspiracy theories, narratives, attacking members of Parliament, especially members on this committee at every turn, we see that the partisan objective of the members who are making these accusations, and it is when, we're all big boys and girls, and, we can all play in that arena, but when it involves independent officers of Parliament, and we just heard the Commissioner saying that he is disturbed when he hears of fellow independent officers raising the alarm that their work is being interfered with or could be compromised, then I think we need to take heed. We need to take heed. And indeed, I want to finish with the letter that I was reading earlier from the RCMP Commissioner.
I understand you might be sharing your time. Would you like me to let you know when you're halfway, or are you going to hand it off?
Halfway.
Very good.
I'll start by saying I'm on behalf of the Conservative Party, I'm just so sorry that we have offended Ms. Shanahan in our job in terms of holding this government to account and discovering and exposing corruption at the highest level. So if that's offensive to her, well, then so be it. That's our job. Commissioner, the issue regarding Randy Boissonneau, I appreciate you've only reviewed the actual newspaper story of the report. You didn't actually listen to the committee. You didn't read the transcript. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Are you prepared to do that, given some of the concerns that have now been raised?
As I mentioned to you, I mean, the report, Mr.
Just yes or no, sir.
Look, I'm concerned because he admitted he lied.
Right.
He also, there are these emails that have emerged that use Randy 7 times, etc.
He was also supposed to provide us, sir, he was also supposed to provide the committee with additional emails, additional documentation, and actually the identity of the person that he claimed was auto-corrected 9 times. And he failed to comply with that order of committee. Does that concern you?
Yeah, of course. We
Okay.
hope it concerns you too, because
Right.
we are talking about parliamentary process here, not my investigation.
And it would be naive for all of us to only conclude that what you received from Minister Randy Boissonneau were all the devices that he had access to. He could have accessed a burner phone that he never supplied to you. He could have used another communication app that he never supplied to you. You agree with me, sir, that there are still ways of communication that he did not supply to you. That is possible, is it not?
You are assuming here basically quasi-criminal behavior. I'm going on this. I would just first of all want the evidence. Once I have the evidence,
Do you believe there are burner phones out there?
Of course there are burner phones.
And do you believe there are other communication apps other than Signal and WhatsApp?
I just answered the question to your colleague. I said for any kind of information, let me have the response from Mr. Boissonneau, and then I will decide whether they are credible and sufficient, or whether I need any more evidence. And then,
Thank you. Hypothetical. Assuming you conclude that Minister Randy Boissonneau has breached the act, what are the consequences to him? Very briefly.
First of all, I would have to begin an investigation. If the investigation comes to that, I make a public report and I send it to the Prime Minister. It's up to the Prime Minister to decide what to do.
You're at half, Mr. Brock.
Thank you.
Now, the end there with Commissioner Conrad's answer saying that if he does the investigation and find that there's anything wrong, he sends it to the Prime Minister, and now Justin Trudeau has to figure out what he's going to do. Doesn't sound like the best options, but I guess that is the procedure. I think I'm going to leave the video at that. So if you enjoyed that, please let me know in the comment section below. I know this one was definitely a lot longer than normal, but again, a lot to cover. I tried to cut what I could. As always, if you enjoyed these committee hearings or just the videos in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as a like. It really helps the channel grow and the videos reach other Canadians. And as always, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.